Job chapter 4, let's call this one chipping away through speculation, as Job's friend Eliphaz is going to say, who can withstand hearing all this from Job without having to say something? Well, as our sister had pointed out on Wednesday night, it was probably best for him to sit there and listen to Job without saying anything, because he is now going to open his mouth in wisdom that really ain't wisdom. And the irony is, he is going to close out this chapter by saying that men live and die without truly understanding wisdom, seeing the way in which that might call into question things that Job has said, without seeing the way in which it should motivate him to stay silent, as he, in the very beginning, calls Job into question for actually being kind to people in a similar situation. Even though folks might not have been in as tragic a situation as Job, it's going to seem that Job was in the habit of encouraging those in their time of need. And Eliphaz is going to use that as an excuse to justify Job needing to stand on his own, using his own advice in his time of need, when that's the exact opposite of what Job did. Job didn't tell other people to pick themselves up and encourage themselves when they were in a position of weakness. He was actually their support. And so Eliphaz is using that as an excuse to be Job's critic in a time when Job was usually offering support to others. His perspective is completely twisted. His wisdom is lacking, and he doesn't see it, even though, as Jesus said, be careful of seeing the splinter in a brother or sister's eye without seeing the log in your own. And so he has seen the ways in which Job seems to be unwise without seeing the inconsistency in what he is doing to Job, and how it's completely inconsistent to the way that Job treated others in their time of need. Beyond that, he's going to raise a few questions, foremost in verse 7. Remember, who that was innocent ever perished. Sounds logical, right? Until from our perspective, which he might not share, you realize that in the Exodus, it started off with Pharaoh trying to kill all the male children in Egypt. I'm supposing they were guilty of something. Beyond that, later on, we see Jonathan, Saul's son, so loyal to his father Saul that he perished with him in battle, even though it was not necessarily for any sin that Jonathan committed. And beyond that, the priests at Nob died when one of them stood up on David's behalf to remind Saul that David had not done anything related to what Saul was accusing him of. But because of their quote-unquote insubordination, he didn't just kill the one who stood up for David, he killed them all for no wrongdoing of their own. And even more, Eliphaz is going to go on to contradict himself in the very next chapter when he goes on at length about the way in which God exalts the poor and needy at the expense of the wealthy who are unjust. But he's going to forget that part of Job's misery is the fact that all of his servants, relatively lowly people, perished along with his livestock and kids. So you can't have it both ways. And so again, in his rush to find the splinter in Job's wisdom, he is missing the obvious contradictions in his own as he goes on toward the end of the chapter to talk about the ways in which none can be righteous before God. He condemns even his angels. How much less can a man stand innocent before God? Well, Job does not have to be completely innocent for God to have identified him as blameless in general, and in this particular circumstance, a man who Satan incited God to stand against without reason. And so even though Eliphaz might not have had a window into heaven to see the discussion between Satan and God, one of the things that he could have done was seen the ways in which it is dangerous to have even the best wisdom if it's untethered from facts. Understanding that wisdom untethered from facts is still speculation, and whether or not he could have specifically known or not, the bottom line is he is passing off his speculation as truth, and it's basically just his opinion. And so true wisdom is understanding. One of the things they've taught us, we talk about from time to time around here, the difference between fact and opinion, something they teach us from the time we are yay high. But as we grow, sometimes we can grow in our confidence without remembering to appreciate the limits of our wisdom. However, the irony is, even under all of the stress that Job's enduring and the accusation that his wisdom is faulty, he is going to prove to be wiser than Eliphaz when in a couple of chapters, he's going to cut through all of this to simply say, okay, what did I do? But in the meantime, Eliphaz is going to continue to rail on Job for another chapter as he continues to pick at, this time, Job's kids.